Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, host Jorden Guth has been learning about the who, the what, and the when of hi-fi from the pioneers who made our hobby what it is today, as well as the modern innovators who are constantly striving to push performance to new levels. That's not going to change, but this year he'll also be learning about the other two W's, where your favorite gear is made these days, and why. So with that out of the way, let's see who Jorden is chatting with this time around.
Hello and welcome to the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Today we have Andrew Welker, Chief Product Officer of Colquhoun Audio Labs, which includes Axiom, Bryston, and Magnum Dynalab. Man of many hats. And just to kind of set the stage before we start chatting, we are here in Dwight, Ontario in an Anechoic chamber on a very balmy 30 degrees Celsius day. I don't even know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's pretty sweating.
Warm,
very warm. And luckily the Anechoic chamber is actually pretty nice. Thanks for taking the time, Andrew.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to kind of dig into the quality control aspects of all these companies and what that entails. Before we jump into that, let's kind of go back and get a little bit of a history about how you came up in audio and how you kind of got to where you are now. So walk me through it. Like what was your first memory of audio in your life?
My first memory was a really, really big pair of black speakers when I think I was probably a toddler in our living room. I grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo, and my father in the early 70s had a fairly high-end audio store called Synthesis Stereo, and it was right within walking distance of two universities. And of course, what went on in those days is that, a lot of students would get their government payout for their tuition, and they would just sign it right over to my dad, who would hook them up with the latest and greatest stereo. There was, in every dorm room in both universities, there was a competition of who had the best audio system. And, that was the heyday of audio really at that point, when everything was still very, very well built and, Japanese manufacturers were still building really, at the forefront of technology. And, it was just a great time. So as you might imagine, being in the stereo sales business, there were constantly sales reps would come knocking at my dad's store and say, hey, do you want to carry this speaker or this electronics line or whatever? And the deal with him was that if he was going to sell it in the store, he had to have it at home first to make sure that it was actually decent. So it was, as I was growing up, at least until I was about 6-7 years old, it was a revolving door of you name it. We had the Magnapan timpanis, we had Klipsch corner horns, we had the Braun active loudspeakers, we had one of the first Carver magnetic field amplifiers, nice turntables. So I grew up with like that stuff almost absorbed by osmosis because it was around me. And my dad was always a big music fan. So even though I shouldn't have been, I wasn't actively listening to, classic rock, Floyd and Zeppelin and all that, it got imprinted because it was all being played in the house all the time. So I became something of a gearhead when I got older and could afford to buy, cool equipment. Unfortunately, my dad didn't have a store anymore at that point, so that timing was bad. But I'm an insane record collector. To this day, I've got about 15,000 records.
Oh,
wow. So music and audio has always been part of my life growing up, and I guess it's a natural that I got into this industry because of that.
And it's really cool. I just need to call it out because you mentioned this actually just before we started recording. So the record store that your dad owned actually came up in a previous episode when we were talking to Paul Barton.
Yes, yeah. Paul was there were a whole group of, techie gearhead students at University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University that they would come, like it was almost a gathering on Saturday afternoons. They'd show up at my dad's store and hang out and kick the tires of whatever new receiver Pioneer had out or what new cartridge was on some turntable that was in the demo room. And my understanding is that Paul Barton was part of that group. And so it's a very interesting thing that, Paul Barton was starting out, a little bit younger than my dad, and got into the speaker business. And from the story that Paul tells and my dad tells, so I guess it's a true story, but I always knew it as true, was that Paul Barton sold the first pair of PSB loudspeakers in my dad's store. So my dad sold that first pair, which is a pretty cool and interesting thing.
That's a special moment for sure.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. So basically, you go through school, you grow up knowing audio and being surrounded by it, being immersed in it.
Yeah.
What was the first kind of role that broke you into the industry?
Well, I knew because of my interest in audio, that kind of, electronics always turned into, kind of grew from that. Like if you're into audio, you have to be into electronics because there's a lot of different electronic components in any audio system. And I was one of these kids that, took stuff apart, much to my parents' chagrin, just to find out, how does this work? How does this tick? And parts strewn all over the kitchen table and probably never to be put together again. But I always had an interest and a knack for how things worked. So I kind of knew that I wanted to go into, when I wanted to go to university and I wanted to take something that would support that. So I did electrical engineering at University of Waterloo, which, it was hard to get back to then, but I just had 2 weeks ago my 30th reunion at University of Waterloo. And you needed low 90s at that point to get into electrical engineering in your high school courses. Now it's like 96, 97. Like, I don't know how many. So I thank my lucky stars that I was able to get that education because, it's done me well. And University of Waterloo Engineering, one of the things they're known for is that they have a co-op program. So you go to school for a semester, you go away and work at a real company actually being paid for a semester, and you do that back and forth. And it's actually part of the requirement to get an engineering degree at University of Waterloo. You can't skip it. It's an integral part. Where I'm leading with that is that I got a job with a research establishment for the Department of Defense that used to be in Downsview. And I did 2 co-op terms there. And you're probably wondering, where is the connection? Well, they were doing research into like acoustics research. And in particular, at the time, they were looking at active noise cancellation. And, everybody now has, you get a Bose or a Samsung or whoever headset. Yeah. From anyone for traveling that has active noise reduction. Yeah. But back then, and this was, the early 90s, that was a, we didn't have the microprocessor technology, none of that. So what they were looking into was, are there any systems that we can put into fighter aircraft and helicopters and things? That's so cool. But they found some massive problems because, for instance, we probably still use them. We had this helicopter called the Sea King. Yep. And the rotors passing over the hull when it's going at certain speeds produces a low frequency vibration that's like 148 dB or something like that. And what was happening was every one of the commercial active noise reduction systems out there on the market just fell to pieces with that input because, of course, the systems were so archaic at that point. They were trying to correct for this massive low-frequency information, and they just fell apart, right? Distorted and all kinds of things. So I helped build a simulator that we could actually generate 140, 150 dB of low-frequency information to test these headsets. And then I was offered a job after I graduated university, and I spent 2 years there continuing that project, but also looking at the early days of 3D audio, where you were simulating virtual audio space over a 2-channel headset.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, so that was very, very interesting, and had the possibility been there to continue working in that field, I may not have stepped into the consumer audio side, but the contracts and the work kind of dried up. And then I found myself in 1997 applying for a job posting in the Toronto Star that Audio Products International, which was Energy, Sound Dynamics, and Mirage loudspeakers, very, very big company at the time, in Scarborough. I applied for a job as a loudspeaker engineer there, and ended up working there for 12 years, starting as a kind of a, very junior speaker designer, because I knew the fundamentals of speaker design, and I had tinkered as a teenager building my own speakers, but really didn't have any hands-on. So I spent 12 years there and kind of worked up through becoming the sort of the head designer of the Mirage brand, and then by the end, before Klipsch took us over, was one of the principal engineers of the company. So
there's a lot of fans of Mirage speakers and all of those products.
Yeah. I think I keep either bumping into people or getting emails from people saying how they lament that those products are not really on the marketplace anymore. And there are a lot of fans. I constantly get emails from people saying, "Oh, I blew a tweeter in my Mirage M1s. Can you help me out?" And I'm like, unfortunately, no.
It's 20-something years past.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I worked at API until API was no longer, and then I started. I talked to Ian Colquhoun, who's the owner of Colquhoun Audio Labs. Actually, it was Doug Schneider, the editor-in-chief of SoundStage, who put us in touch originally, and I got offered a job and started working here in January of 2010.
Oh, wow.
And I've been here since, so we're at almost 15 and a half years, I guess.
So, and this is kind of good timelines to think about, because this is even before Axiom before Bryston came into the fold.
Oh, yeah. That was, I guess, 11. I think Bryston came into the fold in 2021. So that was, quite a bit before that. And so I was hired for this, position, thinking that I would be doing loudspeaker design, because that's what I had done for 12 years. And then I remember Ian saying to me at one point, very, very early on, saying, "We need a new amplifier design." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Well, you're an electrical engineer. You can design an amplifier." I said, "Yeah, from theoretical first principles, yes. But I haven't actually put together, designed any piece of electronics, like the simplest little thing, since I was in high school." So, yeah. But anyway, he said, "Oh, you can figure it out." And that's very much his way. And
lots of confidence.
So I did a lot of studying, and I had a lot of things explode in the lab during testing. But yeah, we did some Class D amplifiers, some subwoofer amplifiers, and then got kind of introduced into the world of discrete electronics with Bryston.
And as you're going up through this, so your current role as Chief Product Officer, how does quality control and quality insurance come into all of this?
Well, as I think a lot of your listeners are aware, if they know Bryston, one of the things Bryston's known for is their 20-year warranty on their analog electronics, so power amplifiers and preamplifiers. And that's, I don't know if it's unheard of in the industry, but it's certainly not common in this world of, 2-year, maybe 5 years on the outside warranties. And people will ask all the time, well, how do you do that? How does the company, stay alive if you're offering a warranty like that? And, the answer to that, as you were asking, quality control, It's if you don't spend the money on the front end, you'll be spending it on the warranty side later on, supporting that warranty. So, I would say that we go to extremes when it comes to quality control because we test the heck out of everything at every stage. And one of the things that that Ian Colquhoun is very big on is that if there's a way to bring it in-house, you bring it in-house.
Yeah.
And that's not just to, say that, oh, we can do this and we can do that. It's so you have complete control over every aspect of making that part or machining that piece of metal or populating that circuit board. And that's all tied directly into quality control. We populate our own surface mount. So we have a pick and place machine, we have a reflow oven, we have all of that. And many people will say, well, there are probably 30, 40 companies just in the GTA in Ontario that will happily do that for you and have got massive facilities and are set up and experienced. And why would you do that yourself? And the reason is that, well, we control now where the circuit board comes from.
Yeah.
We control where the parts are being purchased from, which is a big problem these days. We have run into very often counterfeit components, and you would think that, like a low noise transistor or a power output transistor or something, like who the heck would knock that off? It's such an esoteric thing. It's not like, an inverter IC that's used for electric vehicles where, there are hundreds of millions of them, out there in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Why would you knock off, an audio specific component? Well, people are doing it. Don't know why, but we're able to control the entire supply chain of every component that goes on a circuit board. And on some of our boards, there's 600-700 parts. And if something, if you had another board company that was actually supplying the components as well, and you get a batch of circuit boards arrive here in the factory and we start doing some preliminary testing and there's a problem, where do you start looking?
Yeah.
If you control the supply chain, you control the circuit board, you control the actual population of the board, you really have a limited number of places to look. And surface mount technology is a mature technology now. Like anything else, it's not foolproof. You are not going to get 0% defects.
Yeah.
Particularly when you got a board where there's 600 or 700 parts, because all you need to have is a speck of hair from somewhere get on the board or whatever, and you've got no solder contact on one part. And that may just result in, crackling noises or slightly bad distortion measurements or whatnot, and it might actually cause the board to go up in smoke. You don't know.
Yeah.
The controls that we do is not, people may have heard, about the Bryston 100-hour burn-in. This is another thing that, the Bryston faithful, bend down to and say, oh yes, this is fantastic, It's not that simple. That's actually the second last thing that happens to any Bryston product is that burn-in. Once it passes burn-in, it goes to final testing. If all the final testing goes through, then it gets put in a box and shipped. But before that, before it ever gets on the burn-in bench, before that circuit board, of which there may be 15 in one unit, before that circuit board ever even goes into a bin to be assembled into a product, we test the life out of it. We do a microscope inspection of pretty much every single PCB. And that, again, this is you could have an automated optical inspector do that, a machine do that. There's no substitute for somebody with a qualified set of eyeballs to know what to look for. And also with the experience of, on any circuit board, any modern circuit board, there are going to be some more tricky components to solder, parts that have, a heat pad underneath that needs a lot of solder reflow to actually work correctly. Or there's just some parts with, the orientation on the board. You get experience to know where the problem areas might be on a particular board, and having somebody who has that knowledge inspect every single board where the faults usually can occur when they do occur saves us, from getting down the road of actually going to actually test the individual circuit board and finding out at that point, oh, well, we have an entire run of boards with the same problem on them. And again, that's an expensive process. It takes time, but once that hurdle is passed and we've got an optical inspection done, that circuit board now gets tested in a setup where it's put into essentially a complete working product, but all of the other boards are a known quantity. And we test the heck out of it. We're actually developing a very interesting system now that is going to be modular and allow us to plug every one of the different circuit boards that we use amongst the different Bryston products and automatically send it through a test suite of different functional tests. Like, for instance, if it's the main board of a preamplifier, that might have all of the control circuitry, that might have all of the input switching, that might have the volume control circuitry, all of those things. Well, we're going to be able to actually automate some of that to go through all of the steps and make sure all of the different sections of the board, power supplies, et cetera, are working correctly.
And this is another layer on top of the existing stuff.
On top of what we're doing now. We're doing a similar thing, but in a much less automated fashion. And we're trying to automate it really for consistency, because if you have somebody experienced going through 50 steps to test a particular circuit board, it's very easy. Somebody comes and interrupts them and you miss one or two of them. And then you'll find it when you're doing final testing on the unit that, hey, RCA input number 3 on this preamplifier isn't working.
Yeah.
Right? So we're just trying to, at every stage, as early as possible, is to whittle down every possible fault so that when it gets to the point where we're actually going to put that circuit board or that component into a preamp, an amp, a DAC, a loudspeaker, whatever it happens to be, that component, we have a high level of confidence that it's going to not be the problem at the end stage when we're actually doing the final test and the final measurement. Because there's no point in burning in an amplifier for 100 hours and then finding out it actually had a fault before you even put it on there. You're just wasting time.
Yeah, exactly. Time and energy.
Yeah.
And I think, so this is actually my first time visiting Bryston, Axiom, the actual manufacturing. And a couple things stand out. One, the scale of this place is massive. It's quite large.
It doesn't look like anything from the highway.
No. It looks like a small building with some cool cars out in front and whatever. And then you go in and you keep on going through room after room after room. So the scale is massive. You kind of already alluded to it, but Ian is very much willing, and he has confidence in saying, if a machine or something is going to add value, do it.
Yeah.
So I was going through everything from the pick and pluck for the boards all the way through to the water jets to all the new equipment that's just there. So there's a huge amount of technology in here that adds to kind of what you're alluding to, bringing everything in-house to have full control over it. But then the kind of final step in my mind, in what I was kind of sensing from everyone that I've interacted with, is there's also a giant team of folks that are dedicated to audio. Yeah. And it's not just lip service in the sense of like, oh, they like audio and all this. I was speaking to one of the gentlemen that does the QC up in Bryston, upstairs.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name right now. Blair. Yeah. Thank you so much. B-name. And Blair was like, yeah, I just started working here. I've already owned Bryston components for X amount of years.
Yeah.
and my stuff was actually in for servicing, and this job came up, and I was set to retire, and you know what? I just love them so much, like I'm doing this. And he was kind of going through this idea of like going through the microscopes and looking at all this stuff and doing the hand placements and making sure that all these individual components are up to snuff before even getting to that final QC and quality checks and all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's another element of this, and we're talking largely the electronics, the functionality, but it was also brought up that there's quite a bit of QC in the aesthetics as well.
Yeah, there is, absolutely. And I mean, that's another thing that when Bryston came into the fold here, one of the things that we wanted to do was Bryston had for many, many years was outsourcing almost everything. I mean, Bryston's facility in Peterborough was final assembly and development and R&D, and of course their sales, marketing, but they were not really making anything there, right? They needed foam interiors for their packaging, right? They were buying that from somebody. We make that here in-house. There's very little we don't make here, but Bryston was relying on outside vendors, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, how do you have 100% control if you don't make that thing or finish that thing or populate that thing on your own and don't have it in-house? And the answer is, well, you never have control. So we would sometimes get a whole run. I was hearing stories that, Bryston would get a whole run of, faceplates for amplifiers, and all of the hole drilling was wrong. And it's like, could that happen here? Certainly it could. Is it likely to happen with the checks and balances that we do along the way? Maybe you squeak one out, maybe two would get to the, the paint and the finishing area before somebody noticed. Yeah. But you're certainly not going to, get a delivery on a truck with 500 faceplates that are all no good.
Well, and the iteration on if there's a problem, I can imagine that is much shorter having everything in the house.
Well, that's the other thing, is that if we find the problem, we can correct the problem immediately. It's not like, we're dependent. We've got an order coming up to go overseas, let's say for 30 Bryston 4B power amplifiers, and we desperately need some piece of the metalwork. So we've got the entire production line scheduled, ready to build this because we know that part's going to get delivered on such and such a date. If that part shows up and there's something wrong with it, either in the optics of it, like the finish quality isn't right, or, the black anodizing isn't black, it's a little too purple, or whatever it happens to be, now what? Now you have to call the customer and say, I'm sorry to disappoint you, sir. You were kind enough for, buying 30 of our amplifiers. They're not going to come when we told
expected
you,
them.
Right?
Yeah.
Can't really operate a company well. You can't do that too many times and say, hey, that big order is going to be delayed by, in some cases a month, because when you have an outside company making something like metalwork or heat sinks or whatever it happens to be, you're probably not their only customer.
Yeah.
You may not be their most important customer. So where are you in the line? Oh, sorry, we screwed up, but we can't get to you until, sometimes weeks down the road. So that's another place where we have control. We have control essentially of the scheduling. So we know if we're going to need X number of faceplates or X number of chassis or X number of circuit boards for a particular model for a big build coming up, we can be prepared way ahead of time. We know how much metal we have in-house, like raw aluminum stock. We may go and actually look at that and do a hand count of, what are we sitting on, and know ahead of time, hey, we're going to be short, 5 faceplates, let's say, of a big order. Get the metal on order now so that it comes in at the end of the run of the rest of them, and we've made that up.
Yeah.
So, we talk about quality control, or quality, if you just want to use the general term quality, has got so many facets. It's not just making sure the product performs correctly, or it sounds good, or it's going to last, or it looks good. Quality is everything. Quality to the customer, right? Delivering when you said that you're going to have that unit, to a dealer, shipping it on time, making sure that when the dealer gets it, that the thing looks good and it works well. All of those things are important. And so those levels of control, when we talk quality, it's not just the raw components, it's also being able to make sure that we know we're going to be able to deliver that product on time, because quality in terms of fulfilling the order and fulfilling the customer expectations, that's all part of quality as well. Because, if you're constantly being that company that's saying, hey, sorry, we're going to ship your amplifier late, and you do that over and over again, well, I guarantee you there's another company that wants to eat Bryston for lunch that would be happy to, sneak in there and say, hey, Bryston's not delivering on time. We're hearing that from some dealers. Let's look at our product line instead. So it's all just commitment to making sure that the product looks good, works good, it's going to be reliable, and you fulfill it on time.
And it lasts.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I think it's like just experiencing this firsthand, and we've talked to Ian Colquhoun, we've talked to James Tanner. There's so much that goes into this company or these companies. It's pretty cool, and it's cool experiencing it and seeing it firsthand and kind of getting a little bit of the behind the scenes look on how this all comes together. I know we're kind of a little getting close to our time. One question that we try and ask every single guest that comes on here: if there was a song, a soundtrack to your life, or an album, or something that you could say, like, you could either listen to it all the time, or right now it's just been stuck with you. Is there a song or an album or something that you would pick out of your mind and share with us so that I could steal it and put it on my Spotify playlist?
Yeah, it's pretty, again, it's as I was mentioning before, I had classic 70s rock imprinted on the brain, and one album, I said I'm an LP collector. I've got 40 some different copies from all over the world and different variants, is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, that was so good.
That was something that, that initial heartbeat at the lead in to the first side, I tell you, some of the systems that my dad had, that could deliver like real 20 hertz bass we had a fantastic living room where his setup was. There was just something about feeling the floor vibrate when I was lying on it, as a 3 or 4 year old or whatever, that just imprinted on me. And that I don't have, with a big music collection, I'm constantly listening to new stuff, but that's one that's in constant rotation. I listen to that probably a few times a month.
I love it. Yeah. And all the different copies you have, is there a favorite copy? I'm guessing you're talking not only vinyl, but probably CDs as well, or is it just vinyl copies?
Oh no, I've got the SACD. I've got CD copies from Japan and from North America and whatnot.
Is there one copy or one pressing that kind of speaks to you more than the others?
Yeah, the original first UK release, which they call the Blue Triangle, which for whatever reason the label artwork was different for that first run and that first run only. Oh. And that's a pretty silly expensive album now. I mean, I couldn't afford to buy it today. A good copy is well north of $1,000.
Oh wow.
There's just something about, that was, when that was released, that was worldwide, like the first batch of that album that came out. And sonically, because of course you got to be an audiophile, audio geek too, to have 45 copies of one album. Sonically, there's nothing that touches it, and I don't know why. And if I ever meet up or have the opportunity to talk to Alan Parsons, who was the engineer on that, I'd want to figure out exactly why all of the copies, even the UK copy that came just after that, that wasn't that first run doesn't have the magic that first pressing does. So that's definitely the king. But admittedly, I don't play it too often because it's worth too much money.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I mean, Pink Floyd's an easy one for me to throw on, and I already have it in regular rotation. So that is going to be what I'm going to be listening to on the drive to our next spot.
Awesome.
Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and all the best.
No problem. Thank you.